AM radio, my community now, Hartford Time Press, the Glasgow Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Senate. We have everyone here. Will is excused. Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now's the time for everybody to shine. We get to introduce our committee members, starting with Supervisor Dice.
I'm Supervisor Dice. I represent District 1.
Supervisor Westpollock, I represent District 2.
Supervisor Carol Mary, District 26, which is that very far southeast corner of the county. We're actually down to where all the 4 counties come together: Milwaukee, Ozaukee, Waukesha, and Washington.
Well, Don Creepall, District 21.
Martha Bishop, District 14.
Doug Newman, District 11.
And Will Swisek, who is excused today, has Kewaskum area. I don't know what district it is. Okay, committee purpose, scope, work, and timeline. That is flagged. But the things we're going to be considering will be committee structure going forward. See how many committees, what those committees will be when we go into new session beginning 2022 with 21 supervisors. We'll be looking at elimination of per diems, looking at reducing the salary of the county board chairman, and within that scope of that pot of money, I'm going to look at seeing if the supervisor salaries can be increased somewhat to stay within that same framework of what our budget is already. Looking at additionally, even though we've already decided under 21, we can look at that number again, whatever the committee chooses to do with that. We did leave the caveat open that if the new board coming on board wanted to readdress that, or if we stay at that 21 figure. So, and I think we'll be working with Eric Damcott for the most part, putting together the redistricting. We won't have a part in it. Directions that we have, and Eric will explain it as we go through what his parameters are. I'd like to keep this non-political completely. Let the between the clerk's office and the GIS to come up with 3 different ones that we can figure out which way we're going to go with those. And then the timeline, and I think we can conduct all the work in 3 to 4 sessions, maybe less, depending upon how things go. But today it's going to be pretty much learning. Some of us have heard this before, at least portions of it, and some of us have not. So Eric and Paul Roback will be handling a bunch of different things that we've gone over and before, and the other committee to bring everyone up to speed. So without further ado, redistricting the presentation, Eric Damcott.
Fantastic, everything's working. So I'm Eric Damcott. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I've been at the county for quite a while. I'm currently, my title is the data manager, and I'll here just to give you a little overview of how the redistricting process is going to work, kind of some experiences of how it's gone in the past, and hopefully it helps us make an efficient and streamlined process this time around. So I'm going to call this the redistricting experience timeline. And I don't put this up here to toot my own horn, but just to kind of give you an idea as to how long certain people have been at the county who are going to be involved in the redistricting process this time around. So I'm the Data and GIS Services Manager. I get to be the old guy in the room for this one. Also the GIS Coordinator, Mike Vanderstanden. You may or may not see him very much at the council meetings, but He plays an integral role behind the scenes, both preparing draft plans, data analysis, and it's just another technical resource that we have that we're working on this behind the scenes. So of the people who are going to be around this time for redistricting, we're the only 2 people on that list. So that doesn't need to be on. It doesn't. All right, it's on because I'm just not talking into it. Sorry. So yeah. So anyway, we've been here before. Use us as a resource. The county attorney, our current county attorney, started with the county in 2005. I didn't specifically talk to Brad about this. I don't know how much he had specifically on redistricting process, but then we also had 2 of our current county board supervisors elected in this time period. And again, that's a pretty small group that was here when we did this in 2011. This feels very different for me. In the past, when we've done this, we've had a lot of experience on the board, and there's been significant turnover in the past couple of election cycles, and it's a new group of people. So then we had 5 supervisors as well as our county administrator, now county executive, and that was the group that was here when we did the interim redistricting in 2015. I'm going to talk a little bit about interim redistricting, how that's similar, but also how it's quite different. So I'm not sure if that experience from 2015 is going to be directly relatable to what we're going to end up doing next year. So we have this big group of people right here who were first elected to the county board in the last couple of years. And for them, this was going to be their first rodeo, except for a few of them, who maybe have experience on the other side, people who hold 2 hats and maybe were on the municipal side, but this is their first time at the county doing this at least. I like to divide redistricting into 2 different pieces, both the technical side and the political side. I'm here to help you with the technical side. So that includes analyzing census data, drafting plans, analyzing plans, working with the municipalities on their plans to make sure that it's consistent with the county. And then if there's anything that the county needs to do to make sure that our plan is in sync with the state and federal districts when they're drawn later on in the process. There's also the political side of things, and that's really your job. And that's really, setting the priorities. How are we going to rate these plans? Are we going to try to, what we're going to do with core districts, number of municipalities represented by each district, how are we going to do that urban-rural split, establishing the number of supervisors, all of those sorts of things. So that's really a political decision, and that's where you guys come in. So we're going to have, I think it's 6 takeaways throughout this. This is the first one. Within your technical staff, you have a lot of experience. Take advantage of that. We're here to help you, and we're happy to help you in this process. So I don't think we can do a presentation on redistricting without putting the gerrymandering slide up. So we're going to get these through real quick. Packing, intentionally concentrating a minority group or voting community of interest in one district to reduce the number of representatives that group may access. And the reverse of that is cracking, where you intentionally split people up, making it harder for them to elect somebody. It's really diluting their power of voting strength. Then we also have gerrymandering targeted candidates, hijacking, drawing districts with the intent of forcing 2 incumbents to run against each other. And then the name, I shouldn't say I like this one, but I like the name of it, the kidnapping, intentionally drawing districts in a way that separates the candidate from their traditional voting bloc, making it harder for them to get elected. All right, that out of the way. Why do we do redistricting in the first place? This is an actual example from Washington County. It's between 2000 and 2010. It's not this most recent redistricting. But you can see there in 2000, when the districts were first created, District 3 had a population of 3821 and District 9, 3901. Pretty close, pretty close to population. In that 10-year span, District 3 lost 90 people and District 9 gained over 1,500. So, the people in District 9, their votes diluted, their votes worth less. So the purpose of the redistricting is really to balance these districts to make them equal again. What we do in redistricting, most of it relates to the Equal Protection Clause, 14th Amendment. Districts need to be substantially equal in population. And for our purposes, we generally take the largest district and we take the smallest district. The deviation between those two should be within 10%. If you can hit that target, generally the courts have judged that to be complying with one person, one vote rule. Keep that 10% in mind. We'll be circling back on that later. And then the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is also prevalent, and that it protects the voting rights of the racial minorities. Sorry to talk about redistricting without also talking just a little bit about the census data, which is the input for everything that we're going to do. The census is composed of linear features, county subdivisions, railroads, roads, surface water, and then those form the boundaries of the census area features. Census blocks. Blocks are then grouped together to create block groups. Block groups are further refined to create census tracts. This is a zoomed in area of some census blocks. You can see the areas that we just looked at before, the roads, the municipal boundaries, the water, the railroads. They define the boundaries for those blocks. Behind each of those blocks is a redistricting data set, the number of people as well as the racial and ethnic breakup of those people living within that census block. The redistricting data set comes directly from the census form, so everybody's already filled that out. If you haven't, please do so. Please encourage your constituents to do so. It's important that we get an accurate count, and this is one of the areas where it gets used. So the census block we're going to be talking about a lot. It's the smallest entity for which the Census Bureau collects and tabulates decennial census information. It's bounded on all sides by features that we can see, like roads, as well as non-visible features like municipal boundaries, which if you're walking out there, you can't see. Blocks are grouped together to ultimately create our wards and our districts. And when creating districts, we can't split blocks. There are a few exceptions. Really the only one that we need to deal with is the, if there's been a recent annexation, typically we can split that block, so we can put the, the part that's been annexed into a city district. So in 2010, Washington County was split into 3,200 blocks, ranged in population from 0 to 757. 880 of those blocks contain no population, and the 2,400 that did, the average block size was 55 people. Just kind of keep this in mind. Again, we're going to be circling back to this later on. Because there are so many blocks, though, there are many, many ways that blocks can be combined to create legal districts. Which is the best way? Again, that's one of those political decisions that you'll end up making. Redistricting split up into 3 stages. Stage 1 is when the county creates our tentative supervisory district plan. Stage 2 is when we hand it off to the municipalities to create and adopt ward plans. Stage 3 is when we reconcile any differences between the county tentative plan and those ward plans. And then simultaneous to stages 2 and 3, the local governments will be creating their aldermanic districts. The municipalities that worry about that are the city of West Bend, city of Hartford, and village of Germantown. Everybody else elects their local leaders at large. So we'll go through each of these steps. We'll go through stage 1 in quite a bit of detail, and then we'll just skim over the other 2 because there's less action for the county in those. So the good thing is, we're not doing this with adding machine tapes anymore, which was done in 1990. I'm thankful that I wasn't here for that one. So it's a lot easier now. Legislative Technology Services Bureau creates software that we've used in the past and what we use again this time around. The screen that you're seeing is not the screenshot of what the software that we use, but it gives you an example. This is what it looks like when we're building districts. It's hard to read that table on the bottom, but you can see as we assign census blocks to districts, you can see the number of people that we've assigned as well as the racial breakdown. And then as we construct districts, we can select one or a group of blocks. We can see our statistics changed in that table, and then it's up to us whether we want to accept that change or clear it and start over in a different way. So you kind of work around the county, assigning blocks to create districts, making sure the population and other goals are met as you do that. So real conceptually here, let's pretend that that city, that gray blob in the middle has a population of 6,500, and we're trying to create ideal population size for each district of 3,500. In this, contrived example here, each one of those districts has exactly the same number of population as the target, 3,500. When you actually hold an election, you could end up with a situation like this, where all 4 of the supervisors of those districts end up being from the city. But just as easily, I suppose, you could have a situation like this, where all the supervisors are from the town. So goals of past committees have been to try to do something like this, where maybe you sacrifice just a little bit on your deviation, but now you have your supervisory districts coincident with your municipal boundaries, so that when you hold that election, you're guaranteed 2 supervisors from each. Just by way of example, I looked up what the 2018 county population estimates are. You can see those up there. It's kind of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but not exactly. There's more people in the villages and the cities than there are in the towns. And if you stick with the 21 district plan, each one of your districts are going to have just over 6,400 people in them. So comparing that average district size to the size of the municipality, you start creating graphs that look like this. So you can see the city of West Bend in a 21 district plan should have just under 5 representatives. Germantown, just over 3. City of Hartford, 2 and a part. Village of Richfield, a little less than 2. Village of Jackson, a little more than 1. And then everybody else, their population is smaller than the district size. So you're not going to have a village of Slinger with their own representative. It's going to be a split between the village of Slinger and somebody else. And the same thing is true for everybody else, smaller than the village of Jackson, if you stick with the 21 supervisor plan. So ultimately what you're trying to do again is get the breakdown of those supervisors, hopefully somewhat representative of your area, which, towns have 29% of the people. So hopefully they have about 29% of the supervisors. But geography matters too. And, it's easy to say those things in concept, but it also depends on where the municipalities are located. So Village of Kewaskum currently has a population of about 4,159. If we put that all in one district, somewhere we need to get 2,247 people, and that's going to come from adjacent towns. This is one way you could do it. Many ways that you can do it. In the end, you have a district that's 65% village and 35% town. But just as easily, you could split the Village of Kewaskum right down the middle and put 2,080 people in each of 2 districts. Now you're grabbing 4,300 people from adjacent townships. And again, this is just one example of how you might want to do that. And now you have 2 districts, each of those districts being 68% town and 32% village. Village of Newburgh is an interesting one because it's isolated from other incorporated areas. There's about 1,000 people. Really, our only choice for this one is to add 5,300 people from adjacent towns. Again, one example. So now you have a district that's 84% town and 16% village. And again, there's really no viable alternative that would have the Village of Newburgh in a majority village district just because it's not adjacent to any other villages. Moving over to the city of Hartford, and this is the last example, we're not going through all of them. It has a population of about 14,000 people. The most likely scenario is that you're going to create 2 districts that are completely city of Hartford, but then you have 1,900 people who are going to have to be put in a split district. 4,400 people from adjacent towns would look something like this. And in that split district, you're going to end up with 70% town and 30% city. So a couple takeaways here. There's lots of good tools in the GIS to create and analyze supervisory districts. If the data is able to support a solution, we'll find it with the tools. I'm confident of that. The data doesn't support it, well, it doesn't support it. There's many ways census blocks can be combined to create districts, but goals sometimes conflict. You know, it's your job to define those goals. If you let us know what you're after, we'll do our best to make a plan that meets those criteria. And you know, sometimes it's kind of a laugh line, but you know, define your criteria before, not after you see the draft plans. And then board size alone does not dictate whether rural areas will be the majority in proportion to more or less districts. I kind of, you know, hear that concern a lot. And ultimately it's where you draw the lines, you know, which municipalities you choose to split, and you know, how you treat situations like the village of Kewaskum in that example, how you treat situations like the city of Hartford in that example. So that's stage one. That should take about 60 days, hopefully a little bit less. Once we're done, we pass it off to the municipalities where they create their ward plans and aldermanic plans. Wards do not need to be equal in population. The size of the wards is dependent on the size of the municipality. So town of Germantown with under 1,000 people, they don't have to create wards if they don't want to. Richfield, Germantown, West Bend, and City of Hartford will have wards that range between 600 and 2,100 people. Everyone else will be in that 300 to 1,000 range for their wards. Aldermanic districts are subject to that same substantially equal standard that the county is dependent on getting to for the supervisory districts. So aldermanic districts do need to be equal in population. So ward creation, when there's no aldermanic or trustee districts, is easy. If the county creates supervisory districts that look like those green lines on the screen, in the town of Farmington, we create a ward plan that looks like this. This is going to show up as a conflict because that ward can't be in two different supervisory districts. Ward 3 is currently crossing the supervisory district line, so that's going to show up as a conflict. If, on the other hand, town of Farmington just does this, now we're all good. Each of these wards is within the 300 to 1,000 population range, doesn't cross the supervisory district lines, and we can proceed. It does get more complicated when there's aldermanic and trustee districts. So in this case, again, the supervisory districts might look like the green lines. They need to create wards that don't cross the green lines, which they do in this example. But those wards also have to create substantially equal population trustee districts. In the case of Germantown, 4 districts. And you can see that those wards, which is the shaded colors, don't cross either the green supervisory district lines or the red trustee lines. That's the goal. So this is a real example from 2000 now, not 2010. They're not your current districts. And I understand that some of these school districts have been consolidated since then, but if the village of Richfield has 4 school districts and the county overlaps it with 4 supervisory districts, we've just created a minimum of 13 ballot styles for the nonpartisan elections. Yeah. Which is so there's other things that we take into account too. As best as we can follow those other elected lines that don't change during redistricting, the easier we make it for the county clerk, the local clerk, and hopefully the easier it is to administer the elections. And it's also not just about being easy, but also makes it more transparent for the people who are actually voting in those polling places, that it makes the process more accessible to them too. So takeaway number 5, county redistricting not done in a vacuum. There's interdependencies with local and state processes. And again, the GIS team is here and willing to assist local governments. In years past, it was not uncommon for local clerks to be in my office, and together we would create their ward plan Again, they're providing the political side of it. We're just providing the technical side, but that works out really nice because if there are going to be conflicts with the county supervisory district plan, we're not surprised by it down the road. We can be aware of those up front, and I can help develop a solution to present to you at a future meeting during that stage 3. So then stage 3 is just the reconciliation of the districts and the municipal wards. It's also where the county will hold a public hearing and adopt its final plan. Again, 2000 data, just because I didn't take the time to update the slide with current districts. But for 2000, the city of West Bend started out with 451 blocks. They need to create wards with a population between 600 and 2100. Those wards needed to support the supervisory district plan that had a target population at that time of 3916. And it also needed to support an older district plan. That color is really hard to see, but take my word for it, the target population size is 3,520. So that's really what we're after. I'm trying to get all these plans to stack up on top of each other and have all the numbers work and create fair and balanced districts and all of that too. And also keep in mind the school district, the municipal boundaries, current core districts, incumbents, and really whatever other priorities you set for the plans that we're going to create. So when are we going to do this? The redistricting timeline should look something like this. Apportionment numbers should be delivered to the president by the end of this year. Census should release the redistricting data set by the end of March. We have 60 days to adopt our tentative plan. That's phase 1. Whenever we're done with phase 1, the municipalities start phase 2 to develop their ward plans, and they have 60 days for that. As soon as all the municipalities are done with their ward plan, we can proceed to stage 3, and that's another 60 days as well. And then December 1st is when candidates begin circulating nomination papers for those new districts that we create. Up until last week, I was going to then display all this stuff up here and show how the Census Bureau was, because of COVID, behind on the schedule. That was up until last week. They do appear to be back on track to deliver the redistricting data on time. And talking strictly on the perspective of the local redistricting effort, that's important because we were going to get squeezed with the old timeline. That 180-day process was going to be condensed into 120 days in order to have districts created by your December 1st, 2021 date as to when candidates are going to have to start circulating nomination papers. And exactly how we were going to reconcile that and how we were going to reconcile conflicts in state statute and how we were going to get everybody to get the job done quicker, and including all the municipalities in Washington County. There would have been some concern there. So again, from the perspective of local redistricting, having the Census Bureau deliver their information on time will allow us to follow the normal schedule, which is a good thing. So interim redistricting, what we did in 2015. It is true that state statute allows you to reduce the size of the county board one time between the decennial censuses. That can be done by petition or referendum, or was the case last time by action of the county board itself. The important difference, though, is that supervisory districts are not created from census blocks, but instead created by whole existing wards. So at the time we did redistricting in 2015, instead of having census blocks at average populations of 55, we had 160 wards from which to work from. Smallest had no population, the largest had 2,029 people, and it was some big wards. 14 of those wards contained no population, and of the 146 wards that contained at least one person, the average was 903. Those larger wards makes it really hard to fine-tune districts and get even population. So in the plan that was adopted in 2015, the difference in deviation between the largest and smallest district was over 20%. That's over twice the substantially equal standard. It was the best that we could do with whole existing wards. We also had districts that kind of looked like this. Now, we wouldn't have chosen to make a district of this shape, but that kind of flag on the north part, that's the town of Polk in the northern part of the town of Jackson. That flag in the north part of the town of Polk, that was a single ward. So we either had to take that whole area or none of it. We couldn't split that. And as a result, you kind of have a district with a flag on it like that. So takeaway number 6 is that although you are allowed to do one interim redistricting between 2021 and 2031, be aware that there are significant differences in the process and the options that you'll have if you choose to do that again. So again, strictly from a technical standpoint, I would encourage you to not kick the can down the road, to not view 2021 as a tick and then do the talk in 2025 or 2026, something like that. You know, if you know what the right number is, just do it now. You'll have a lot better options to create those districts than what you will if you decide to do an interim redistricting in 2025. I will likely be here, and I'll be happy to help you if you choose that. But I'm telling you now that your options won't be as good. That's what I have. Hopefully, I answered some questions. If there are questions that remain, I'm happy to take them. You want me? Who's running the meeting? Just
Question for you. In the village,
Okay. In January 1st, 2021, the village of Jackson will be annexing in 3 large subdivisions. When they do the census, it's as of April of 2020. How does that affect those people with your redistricting numbers?
Yeah, so what should happen? What should happen is if there's an annexation that's occurred recently, we should be able to split that block to reflect the new annexation, and it will be up to the county with the assistance of the village of Jackson and the town of Jackson to know how to divide the people up in that census block. I mean, you're absolutely right. They're going to, the Census Bureau is going to put those subdivisions in blocks that, you know, after the first of the year will include some village residents and some town residents. We will have to determine how to split up those populations, but we should have the ability to split up that census block, assign the population, and then use that new split block as we're creating supervisory districts so that you don't have those. If you choose, you can put those subdivisions in a village district and the parts that weren't annexed, leave them in a town district. Mm-hmm. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
What about my life? I'm assuming that even though we don't have finite numbers at this time, someone somewhere has good approximations of what those populations are going to be. And some of these drills, so to speak, some of these examples are being worked on at this time, or are we going to wait till whatever the timeline was, all of a sudden April 1, we hit this with no prep? I'm assuming that some of the rehearsal is being done, anticipating number changes.
Well, I wish we had that. We can, the Census Bureau releases population estimates for municipalities and such throughout the decade. And when I created those charts that I showed on the slide previously, that's where those came from, actually from the Census Bureau. They don't tabulate populations down to the block level between the censuses. So I can't get a block. If I download a block layer, it's going to have essentially the 2010 population on them yet. So when I did the examples with the Kewaskum and Newburgh and whatnot, that those were using 2010 blocks. That was not using, projected 2021 or 2020 population counts. That's what the Census Bureau is doing right now. I mean, they're going out and knocking on doors and trying to get responses from the people who did not respond via mail, internet, or telephone. And they are now scheduled to finish their field work by the end of September. And then we'll be crunching those numbers nationwide at the state level to come up with the apportionment numbers by the end of the year and down to the census block level by the end of March. And that's when we'll get it. They'll be delivered to the legislature, and the legislature will distribute them down to the counties then. So I wish I could tell you we had, great numbers that we could have this all in the bag and done ahead of schedule, but there will be a lot of work to be done in those 60 days for sure when we're creating our tentative plan.
So it's all going to hit the fan in a very compressed time frame.
Well, the good news is it's not compressed anymore. I was worried that we're going to go down from 180 days to 120 days. And I was a little nervous about that. But if we follow the normal 180 days, as long as we're not hemming and hawing about number of supervisors and how you're going to rate the plans that we created, if you have all of that picked up ahead of time, really when that data is delivered, we can start creating plans on day one. And it doesn't take, the technology makes it a lot easier to create a plan. I mean, for the county our size, it doesn't take, a couple hours. You can create a plan that's pretty good. And you have a couple different people looking at it, we see different things as we go in there. You kind of get a familiarity of the data set, what's going to work and what's not going to work, and you move forward. So yeah, I mean, I'm not scared of the 180-day timeline, but we're gonna have to be ready to go. There's not time to dilly dally.
I don't want to jump down too far into the rabbit hole, but a lot of talk about the fair districting, fair maps, and most of it centers around districting around political persuasion.
Yep.
And that's not what we do. There are certain criterias that it doesn't go whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent. It goes, I think you explained it pretty well, but I wanted to kind of go over that again so that anybody who's watching or watches later can kind of understand that how the mapping actually does work. Again.
Yeah, I'd prefer to stay off the third rail up here, but I will say that I'm proud of the process that Washington County has run every time that I've done the redistricting. We've held all of our meetings in open session, and if a county, the county board supervisor were ultimately on record as to why they picked this plan over that plan. There was, like I said, it was all done. Sure, the plans themselves were, drafted, in a back office, but the political part of it was all done in open session and open meetings. The public was welcome to come. Some did. Lots of supervisors, even those who weren't on the redistricting committee, came. So it's, that was, to me, I think that's something Washington County can be proud of.
Any other questions? All right, thanks, Eric. That was
Thank you.
really good. So moving on, Paul, you're on the clock.
Yeah, it never shuts down. Oh, perfect. You're the best. Can I ask a quick question? Even though you can't start building the maps now, you can start developing the criteria of the political process. Oh, for sure. Now, so that when we get to that timeline, you have to hit the ground running. So like number of supervisors or whatever other type of criteria you want to use, like following school district boundaries or whatever else, you can make all those decisions now, so you don't have to wait.
Is it okay if you kind of move your mask a little bit so I can actually hear you?
How's that?
There you go.
You're the boss, man.
Pretty muffled,
Oh,
I'm
hey.
kind of old and decrepit, so it's like, and I'm not wearing my hearing aids.
Here we go.
So yeah, I thought I'd start off a brief introduction of myself for those who I haven't met yet. My name is Paul Roback. I work for UW-Madison Division of Extension, Washington County. Big title, right? So the Division of Extension, our mission is to fulfill what's known as the Wisconsin idea, that the boundaries of the university are the boundaries of the state of Wisconsin. Our goal is to extend those resources of the UW to where people live and work across the entire state and to bring those challenges back to the university to be studied and researched. And in extension, we do this primarily through our county partnerships. So we have an extension office located in the Public Agency Center across the street, providing a number of services and educational programs, including 4-H and agriculture, master gardeners, and then myself in community development. And in community development, I spend most of my time working for you on the county board, as well as the local municipalities, and doing strategic planning, organizational development work with nonprofits in the county. I've been here in Washington County since 2007, so I've had the pleasure of being here through these discussions on both the county board side, restructuring, and also on the administrative side, going from coordinator to now county executive. So today's presentation is really a summary of all that work. In the end of last year, 2019, I had the pleasure of helping facilitate some of the discussions with the 2019 Structure Advisory Committee. And this presentation today will really cover the 2015 and the 19 studies. So this map here is always a fun map to start with. This is from NACO, and it's showing the legislative body, the county legislative bodies across the United States. The darker the color blue, the greater the number of legislative representation. So you can see in Wisconsin, we have a lot of dark blue. So we have a lot more county representation, county board supervisors, than some of the other states across the country. And for those that have been on the county board for a while, and if you've traveled to other states and gone to conferences, you often will hear feedback. At least I'll hear it when they come back. It's like, oh, you know, this county only has 3 supervisors and they can all get all the work done. Or this county might have 5 or 7. Minnesota has 5 or 7 supervisors, 5 or 7 supervisors, depending on population. And you know, historically, Wisconsin is unique. We're based off the New York model. So you can see how New York, Michigan, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Illinois are all somewhat similar, although Wisconsin seems to crank it up a notch in representation for whatever reason. And also Wisconsin, county governments are really an arm of the state in many instances. So there's a lot of functions that Washington County or counties in Wisconsin that are providing that other states don't give that authority to their counties. For example, we have county highways, we have county public health, health and human services, are all being delivered at the county level, whereas in some states, those are really delivered by the state. So this is just kind of a point of reference showing across the country. For Wisconsin, now the shading in this is actually based on population of the county, not by supervisor, number of supervisors. You probably can't read it because I can't read it. The numbers that are in there will have the whole number of the supervisors that are in the district, so or in the county. So in Washington County, we have 26, but we're allowed to have much more than that. In state statute, we're allowed based on our county population is what's in parentheses, and I believe that number is 47. So we could have as many as 47 if we wanted. But the trend over the years has been to go smaller, and I'm assuming that's trend will continue moving forward as well. The county with the smallest number of supervisors is Menominee. They have 7. That's kind of a unique situation because most of the county is tribal land. Otherwise, the next 2 counties that have the next lowest number are Walworth, so our neighbors to the south there with 11, as well as Rochelle. So the last study committee in 2019, we invited in Walworth County, both their administrator who retired shortly after visiting us. That was planned before he visited, don't worry. And then also the county board chair. So we can learn from them how they operate with only 11 supervisors. And then we also brought in Wisconsin Counties Association, so we can get kind of a statewide perspective as well. I don't think you can really talk about Washington County's board size without also talking about the administrative form of government. So the other side of the coin is administration. So in 1997, Washington County created the position of administrative coordinator. Before that, the county board chair did that role as well. With the county coordinator, the state statute for that basically says the powers and duties of that position are dictated by the county board. So you basically write the position description and that person does the job based on that. And Washington County had two coordinators. The longest serving one was Doug Johnson. And when he retired at the end of 2014, the county changed the position to that of administrator. The county had been discussing that for a number of years and made the switch when that retirement occurred. And the difference between coordinator and administrator is that the administrator's position, the responsibilities are really dictated in state statute. And the biggest responsibilities that were different is that the administrator has the ability to hire and fire department heads. And so that brought on Josh Shulman with us, our first and only county administrator. That's pretty unique, I think, in probably the state history of administrative forms of government. And during his tenure as administrator, a number of different things occurred that I think helped led us to changing the size of the county board. So the county board committees really shifted to more of a public policy focus. When we had a coordinator, those supervisory committees are really more on the day-to-day pulse of the departments and providing greater oversight. So they were actually reviewing monthly financial statements from departments and staffing plans and really looking at more of the minutia of running county government. Whereas when we hired the administrator, it was really their responsibility to do that so that the county board could really focus on the public policy decisions and not have to go to such finite detail with what was occurring at the department level. With that, we also developed the agenda prep form with the public policy questions and background information, the consent agenda, and the priority-based budgeting. I think all three of those sub-bullets there really made those committees operate more effective and efficient so that you could spend more time on the public policy, setting that direction for the county to go in. And I should mention, there's a number of supervisors in the room that lived through this. So if I'm misspeaking at all, please feel free to correct me. Don's shaking his head up and down, yes. So
far, so good.
and I know Don's not shy. He's going to interrupt me if I need to be. So if I need to be right, then feel free. I'm just kind of providing, some of this is my perspective, but I think I have a pretty good pulse from being here and living through this. So that really teed us up then for the 2015 study committee process. And as a result of that, the recommendation was to reduce the county board from 30 to 26. And then we also reduced the number of committees. We didn't need all these committees. We basically had a committee for every county department at that time. And instead, we ended up with committees that were overseeing multiple departments because they could really focus again on the policy and not the specific details of the department. With the 2018 election, we changed the structure of the committee slightly, and I'll go over that a little bit, just because when we went through such a big shift, going from 10 committees down to 6, we made some assumptions about workload for committees, and some of it was a little off. One committee ended up with a lot of work and really long meetings, and another committee ended up with not as much work, and their meetings sometimes were canceled because they didn't have anything, they didn't have a public policy issue to discuss. And then that brought us to last year with the board size again. And then also with administrative form of government, the switch to county executive this past April. So that brings us to why did we start talking about this last year before this past election? And the reason is that we had a lot of supervisors that had been on the county board. I should say we had several supervisors that had been on the county board for a number of years. That indicated that they were not going to seek re-election. And so it was decided that we wanted to capture some of that knowledge that they had on the board to come up with recommendations for all of you today with the new county board that was elected in 2020. So although they came up with the size of 21, they recognized that that was just a recommendation for all of you now. And you can, as Don said in the beginning, you can either accept that or come up with a different number. Okay, so 2015, I can't give you a preview. We had a study committee, had 11 members on it. Out of the 30 county boards, had over a third. We had a number of staff, the administrator, county clerk, and county attorney. So at that time, we had a different county clerk and a county attorney than we do now. And then myself, I'm the extension committee, the one educator up there. It was a lengthy process, 7 months. Had 6 committee meetings. We had a joint meeting between the executive and finance committees. We had a separate finance committee back then, so that we could get both of them on board. The presentation of the county board to get their input, and then the study committee took that all in to develop the final recommendation. We brought in the Counties Association, the administrator from Sheboygan County, the county board chair from Ozaki, and then resources from Extension. We brought in those counties because both of those counties had administrators, and both of them had gone through looking at committee structure and looking at reducing the number of committees they had on the board. So the intent of this really isn't for you to see the minutiae of the slide, but essentially the top left corner is where we were with, we had the executive committee and the 9 committees underneath that. Chris will remember the fun sticky wall we had, and Don was there as well. That's what's that blue tarp on the right photo there, where we took committees and all the departments and we rearranged them to what we thought made sense. And as we discussed stuff, we could slide things and move it around. And then we came up with eventually the bottom left recommendation, which was the executive committee with 5 subcommittees underneath it. And the theory behind that then drove how many supervisors were needed. So back in 2015, it was really a bottom-up approach. We decided on the number of county board supervisors based on kind of the committee structure of the county board. So we had the executive committee and 5 standing committees. And then each of those 5 standing committees had 5 supervisors each. So 5 committees times 5 members plus the county board chair gave us the 26 number. I'm going to skip this slides because Eric just presented all this, why it's important to go through this now versus waiting between the decennial censuses. And then in 2018, as I mentioned, things were tweaked a little bit to balance the workload between the committees. The reason why we came up with the 5 committees that we had was some of the filters that were used were balancing the workload so that county board supervisors, each committee had about the same amount of work, so you didn't have one committee meeting lasting 4 hours and one not meeting at all because they didn't have any work to do. We also looked at number of employees in each of those county employees. We looked at budget levels for each of those as well. So there was a lot of different filters that were used to come up with those committees, but really, I think it was county board workload that really drove the final decision of what the current structure that we have now with committees. So that brings us to 2019 in preparing for the 2020 redistricting, being to capture the experience of the county board members. And really in 2015, part of the discussion then was that it wasn't a one and done situation. We weren't just going to reduce the county board once. It was, we're going to reduce it by a small amount, see how it goes, and then in a few years have a discussion again, get the, again, pulse of the board to decide, is 26 the right number? Maybe we could reduce more, or maybe more supervisors were needed. And as you probably have heard from the 21 recommendation, it was more wasn't needed, evidently less. So the policy question for the committee was not just looking at the county board side, but also thinking through the census as well as the transition to county executive. Last year, we had 9 members on that study committee of the 26 on the board. Same makeup with staffing the committee. A very short timeline, 3 months, and 4 meetings. And Eric was there to provide kind of the redistricting information that I just gave you now, We brought in John Huckmer from the Counties Association, and as I mentioned, Walworth County as well, to hear how they manage with 11. Kind of the Cliff Note versions of that. They manage effectively. They've kept 11 on their county board for a number of years. They've had discussions come up several times. They've looked at it several times in the past. Their county board chair is in favor of a larger board, but the rest of the county board keeps voting to keep the 11. Part of the reasons why the county board chair said that she didn't like the 11 was that their committee meetings that they have as a county board are where all the discussion and all the main decisions occur. And not only do the members of the committee show up, but then also some of the other members of the county board. So then you usually have more than a quorum of the county board attending those committee meetings. So by the time that the agenda item gets to the county board, most, if not all, the county board has already heard all the information. So by the time it gets to the county board, it's a very quick process, which some really like. They think it's a very efficient and effective way to run. Whereas the criticism of it is that some feel that, and maybe to the public side, that by the time the issue gets to the county board, it looks like a rubber stamp because they're not really talking about the issues because it was all done. All the sausage making was happening at the committee level. Obviously, their county board feels that 11 is a great number because several times they've looked at it and have operated that way. So again, the two different approaches, 2015, we looked at the number of committees that helped drive the number of supervisors. In 2019, we took a different approach. It was much more focused on what number of supervisors you think we need to run Washington County, to make those policy decisions. And then that can then dictate what type of structure we need with the committees. And the reason for that, that was expressed at the time, is that we have those 5 standing committees, and you can look at restructuring those. There was discussion about reducing it down to 4, as well as if you really decrease the number of supervisors on the county board, and then you're really looking at a completely different type of structure with committees. And we looked and researched the concept of the committee of the whole quite a bit. And the committee of the whole is essentially all supervisors on the county board would meet to discuss. So Ozaukee County does this for educational purposes. So they have a committee of the whole, and the county board will come in to learn about something, but they won't actually vote on it. But if you're having 7 or 5 county board supervisors, which some of the study committee started off wanting as a goal target, it wouldn't make sense to have 5 committees then, right? Because you basically have all the supervisors on the same committees. So then the committee of the whole was researched on whether or not you could just have one kind of committee of everything and have the everything discussed and decided on with that one committee. Or if you used number of committees, you could kind of stack them in a row. So you'd have one committee meet and discuss, and then the next committee would reconvene right after, and they just so all that was discussed. It got kind of tricky talking through that, but as the committee kept moving forward, those lower numbers became weren't the final recommendation. Some of the data that
Chime in a little bit, Paul.
What?
When we talked about the committee as a whole, I don't know if everybody's privy to that. I know Chris was there. But it's basically one of the things that I thought was kind of cool about it was that since all supervisors are involved with all committee decisions, we don't have, the committee has to stand through all the, sift through all the information, come up with a decision and make a recommendation to the board. And then we have 3 or 4 supervisors that are constantly asking the same questions that have been answered at the board, at the committee level. This way, everybody gets their kick at the cat right at the beginning. You go through the committee as a whole. You have 2 weeks to stew on it. Your constituents have an opportunity to call you up, say, what are you thinking about? Or I want you to do this, or I agree with you. And then you go on and your regular board session, then you make those decisions and put them into either ordinance or you codify them that way. So, okay, sorry.
No, great. And Through our research, and I asked my colleagues at UW-Madison to research this as well. Although a number of counties have committee of the wholes, and they're using them as Don suggested, some of them are using for educational purposes like Ozaki. None were using it as like, instead of having committees, you just have a committee of the whole. We couldn't find an example of that in Wisconsin. Not that you couldn't do it, but we just couldn't find another example. So some of the data points that we did look at, and some of the fun as well as challenge of these type of discussions is that there's no single easy answer for coming up with the number of supervisors to have in county board. It's not based on county populations. You know, you can't say, oh, we have 136,000, so we should have X amount of supervisors. It's not based on administrative form of governments. Now that you have a county executive, you don't say, okay, now you need X amount of county board supervisors. We get like we can have up to 40, what I say, 47. So we have a lot of flexibility, and it's up for you to decide what number you want. So the committee looked at a number of different data points, including this one, where we looked at the counties with the 10 largest county populations, excluding Milwaukee County, because they're a large county and they have, I think it's 18 supervisors, or a smaller county board. But we looked at these other counties here, and you can see, like Dane County, they have a lot of supervisors. They have 37, but each one of those supervisors represents 14,338 residents. Whereas if you go down to Washington County, we have 26, and each of you represents roughly 5,230 supervisors. Marathon County, it's a large land mass as well as a large number of supervisors, 38, and each one of them represents 3,577. So if you would take these 10 counties and kind of come up with an average of one supervisor for how many would be 8,128. So if you just took the average of these 10, each supervisor is representing just over 8,000. So then if you do the math, if we apply that math here in Washington County, we would need 17 supervisors. So each of those 17 supervisors each represent 8,128. So that's just one data point. Another data point was we looked at all the counties in the state. So when the Counties Association brought us their data, we looked at all the numbers. So as I mentioned, board size ranged from Menominee 7 up to Marathon 38. The average is 22. The value that occurs most often is 21. So most counties in the state have 20, or the number that occurs most often is 21 supervisors. And then the median is, or the middle value is 21. So if you line up all the counties in a row, all the numbers in a row from 7 up to 38, one in the middle is 21. So that 21, 22 number comes up quite a bit here when you're looking at these three statistical ways of looking at the data. And then the third way we looked at it is in the study committee meetings. After 3 of them, we did a ballot process where we asked supervisors to write on a piece of paper what they thought their ideal board size in Washington County was. And you can see at the first meeting, October 28th, the numbers did range from one supervisor wanted 5 and one supervisor wanted 27. You can see it was a pretty big range there, but the mean was 16. So that average again was 16. And what's funny is that even though the numbers changed with the ballots at the other 2 meetings, the mean average still stayed at 16, which is just to me fascinating. No matter how many different times we did the vote, the middle, the mean always came out to that. But you can see what was interesting in December that the lowest number is now 11. That high number actually went up even more to 28. But you saw a little bit more consistency. You saw repetitive numbers. So there's 2 11s, 2 13s, 2 15s, 2 21s. So how in the heck did we come up with 21 as the answer? So these again are the 3 ways we kind of spliced up the numbers. We came up with 21 mainly because those on the committee thought there was a broader support by the county board to do another gradual reduction. So just like 2016, when we went from 30 to 26, there'd be another gradual from 26 to 21. And for those members that had been on the board for a long time, and lived through both of those reductions. And that's a pretty big chunk. That's 9 supervisors. 30% of the county board had been would be reduced through these two processes. There's also a lot of unknowns related to having our first county executive. So having that position and was going to be really unique to our county, and we weren't quite sure how that was going to play in with the county board and how many county board supervisors you have. And as you know, the main difference between the administrator and the county exec is that the county exec is elected. Then they also have the veto power of the county board, which is something that two things that the administrator didn't have. And then there was also discussion at the study committee that we could reduce the number of board committees by 1, which would give you 21 members. So 4 committees with 5 members each, plus the county board would be 21. Every time both study committees looked at this, it seems like 5 is a good number to have on a county committee. It seems to be good with discussion, brings a variety of perspective to the committees, and then also helps with quorum as well. If you have a smaller number, then you have to make sure that everyone's there, right? And so having the county board chair also fill in with those quorums helps. And then this was an important factor for at least one member on the study committee, that the number would be divisible by 3. So the reason for that is that for some actions on the county board, you need a 2/3 vote. So having 21 members would make that calculating that number easier. And these are just next steps that we, when I presented to the county board back in February, what all of you had to do now after the April election. That's simply reaffirming the board size, establishing the committee structure, roles and responsibilities of the board chair, and as Don mentioned, also pay. County board staff support, we mentioned that before. I don't think Don mentioned that today. I don't know if that's on the table on that meeting. And then also decide the redistricting process. Whether or not this committee is doing it, whether or not another committee is going to be doing it.
We're kind of reassessing how everything works together with an executive and a legislative branch now, and how the county attorney responds to who they report to, and it's a little bit different how appointments are made. Found out about that. We're trying to get that straight now. So there's been a number of changes with how staff interacts with the county board again. So
yeah, and some counties like Milwaukee and Dane, their county boards have their own staff. So staff members that report to you to kind of provide checks and balances with the county executive. I don't think Winnebago or Fond du Lac has that or not. So
yeah, I'm not certain how they operate.
I think we also wanted, excuse me, to stay at a odd number so that we didn't have tie votes.
Yeah. Like when we said 26, we'll never have a tie vote.
Yeah, and then whatever's there just fails.
yeah, tie votes are no fun. Any questions? Done a lot of work here in Washington County, and we're kind of are looked to now for guidance across the state. So this presentation actually put it together for Marathon County was interested in the information, and I presented it to Dane County as well. So the counties with the 2 largest county boards are both also discussing county board downsizing right now.
As usual, Washington County leads the way.
Yeah.
Yep, we're the innovators.
Paul, I think it's an excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's very broad based, but yet you're not too far down in the weeds. It's just very well done.
Oh, thank you.
I think you capture everything. You did neglect to talk about the glue problem.
The sticky wall?
You don't have to say that, but
So I was funny that the first time using the sticky wall, you use like this 3-on adhesive spray, and I didn't have the nozzle pointing away from me, and so I sprayed my pants with the sticky adhesive right before the committee meeting. So I tried my best to get out. It was a dark pan, so it didn't look too so. I just called it
Said
out right
paper
away at the
sticking
beginning.
going
Hey,
all
like,
over the
this
place.
is what happened.
Every
The
time we
thing
walk
starts
by
sticking to
something,
me
it's
during the
sticky.
meeting. So ironically, the rest of the story is that I was able to get the stain out, but then the zipper broke right before I was going to give a county board presentation in this room.
It was a great icebreaker. It really worked out well. Everybody-
After
everybody
the
good-
zipper broke,
good laugh.
those pants went in the garbage.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't even give this a good win. I mean, these are just, yeah, right?
3M.
That
3M.
was the safety pin. I couldn't risk it.
It works.
Had fond memories here.
Awesome. Both of you guys did an awesome job. So I think, anybody have any additional questions or? Going? Thinking?
How likely do you feel it is that somebody,
Yeah.
how likely do you feel it is that someone would bring up the size of the board again? Or are we hoping that that ship has sailed?
I'm almost thinking it sailed,
Okay,
but we
good.
did, since we did want to reaffirm it, it's up for
'Cause
discussion. It
that's
depends
why
upon
I was
where
wondering.
the rest of the board, where the rest of the committee wants to go with it. I mean, we'll talk about a couple of different things. With that, with the county executive now too, what role does the board play in having the authority to rein in an elected official? Typically, it's a smaller group, which makes it more difficult for the county executive to run roughshod over the board. It seems counterintuitive to me, but it's a smaller board actually wields more power to control the county executive. I'm good with 21. Yeah.
I,
So I think we did a lot of discussion, but things have changed in a little over a year. And
mhm,
if we want to look at it, if we're not, we just move on to the next part.
right.
So,
I,
I would encourage us to stay at 21. Let this boat float for a little bit
Mhm.
because there are so many factors up in the air. Like you said, we're transitioning to a county executive. We're going to a smaller size. We're redistricting, so which means five districts, technically, people who may want to come back can't because there isn't going to be space for them. There's enough on our plate at this point in time. I would encourage, and you've got basically a third of new county board members again. I would strongly encourage this group to recommend and propose that we stay with the 21
Yeah.
for at least one term. And then if it doesn't work, then change it.
yeah.
I was one that voted against downsizing the board, but the decision was made and I think we need to stay with it.
I agree with that. I
Yeah.
concur.
I really think if we want to address it again when I'm no longer probably around.
Stop smiling every time you say it.
Yeah. And, the next census, maybe you want to address it. I don't know. It
I think
really was awkward and hard for GIS to really come up with a plan midstream, That's why I think Eric was adamant that, if you're gonna do anything, do it now. Give them the tools. All right, this is what we need to work with, and they can put together a plan. So, and I think I'm happy with 21.
Let's give it a try, for heaven's sakes.
That's the way I look at it. Oh, go ahead.
So this might be for Eric. So now is the best time to redistrict because of census. Now, let's say 4 years down the line, they decide, hey, let's go down to 19. Just from my understanding, what makes that difficult is you only can divide that by full wards, right? And keeping the population the same is a little more difficult, or the representation, I guess.
You're gonna get wards in the city of West Bend that are 2,000 people size. So you're moving 2,000 people at a time from one district to another district when you're trying to fine tune those populations. Where if you're going down to census blocks, that are census blocks that have 10 people or 100 people or a much smaller number. And that's why it's so much harder to get those even districts when you're doing it midstream and only have the words to work with. But yeah,
That's just my concern when they talk about, well, let's try this for a little bit. If you do that before the next census, then you have those issues. different numbers of representation per supervisor.
My guess is that if you were doing interim redistricting again, it would look, it'd be a similar process to what you had in 2015, where you could create districts, but they're not going to be as equal in population as what you would have if you just did them now.
Right, yeah, I guess that's what I was bringing to attention.
I don't see where an interim, unless something terribly drastic happens, I don't see where an interim redistricting would be a good idea. We're doing so many things different now. I mean, like you said, there's so many things with the county executive that we have to fix, and it's probably gonna take us a couple of years to get through all that.
We're already downsizing the board. We need some time to work through all that, and we might be adjusting the committees in between there. I think changing the numbers is just gonna put more confusion into just say, we're gonna do this for 10 years, and we're gonna stick to it.
21 is pretty much common.
Done. I think the reason we did that last interim redistricting was there was a cry from the public to reduce the size of the county board. So they could have done that through petition and come up with any number they wanted. They could have made it 9, 10, whatever. By doing the interim districting, that gave us the control as to how we wanted and how much we wanted to reduce the county board. So that's why it was done and why we felt we had a better handle on getting at a lower number, but still making it feasible to run the county the way it needed to be run. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
Anytime.
Next meeting date, are we gonna just do a doodle poll for the next one? Probably in September, first week in September, second week. Usually the first week is always pretty wide. Actually, I'm out of town the first week. Oh wait, no, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm available. Yeah, so somewhere on there, figure out what a good time on a doodle poll is. So I like using those. Everybody gets to, all of a sudden you get everybody like, okay, yeah. You got everybody in a line. Okay, that's the one. No excuses. You signed up for it. Okay.
Can we get a copy of your presentation sent to us electronically or something?
Yep.
I'd like that information.
So, yeah. You get Paul's too. As long as we know.
Well, I got
You got that one? Oh, you got it. Yeah,
we
that's right.
have that one.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. We're adjourning. Thanks, everybody.
Got to notice either the first week or the last week.
Or the easiest, yeah.
Is that what you're looking